Alright, I haven't even posted the video I made yesterday. And I'm making another one today. Try to keep this one a bit shorter. I have started gluing the third ring. Now, all I'm doing is gluing the third ring sections to make the ring. I'm not gluing them to ring 2 yet. I'm just gluing, I guess you could say, horizontally across and not vertically. This piece, I was really worried because obviously any defects in how the ring goes together here, say your circle is more of an oval, then you've got these pieces that go on top, and so they might be out of alignment, and then that might add to the alignment by the time you get up here, so these are even more out of alignment. So I was worried about how far off these pieces would be. My dry fitting has gone okay. If you see, the reason I'm showing this is there's a few different ways that you can go about this. I just thought I'd show my way. Another way, if you check out Jason Charlton's R2D2 build log on Astromech forums, you have to sign up to view the Astromech forums, astromech.net, but it is free. He's got a really good build log for his R2D2 on there. And when he did his third ring, he used this. This is called the top ring because it sits on top of the body. So if you look around it, you'll see that you've got this lip all the way around. You have this flat area that ring I just showed sits on. And then you've got the lip here, which the width of the ring fills that up. So that ring goes across and touches all these points here, and even the back piece, same thing. So basically what Jason did was he went like this, and if you can see, if I get the ring actually lined up approximately right here. Okay, so that hole lines up there, that one lines up there, the other one lines up there. So he clamped all of his ring 3 pieces to this top ring, ensuring that they were round. And if I just kind of hold this up here, you can see on mine that my back panel's not perfectly round. The curve is a little bit off on that end, just resting it without being clamped. So that's a good point for clamping it on. Also, I don't think he did it, but because all of those holes, again, I've got this, I just laid it down and now I've got it twisted around. Because all of the holes in the top here match holes in this ring, you could also put bolts through all of those, so it goes through the ring and into the piece, and that would also be a way to help keep it aligned, although you're going to have some wiggle room because obviously they don't fit bolts. The threaded rods that you eventually use 4 of to clamp the whole body together, all 3 rings are clamped together by 4 threaded rods that go down through, and some of these are extra holes for like the dome mounting, etc. Obviously they're not going to be just exactly the size of the threaded rod. there'll be a little bit of play. But putting bolts through all those pieces as well as clamping is another way to help you get it rounded. My issue is that my seams between levels, between rings, weren't very good. I had a lot of sanding and filler, and I still have work to do, obviously, to get the transition from each ring to be as invisible as possible. And I was worried again, like I said, that if this ring is off a little and then I glue this one, now this one is going to be off a little because of this one, and it by itself might have been off a little, so it might be. So that's why I've done pretty much this same process when I built my rings. I built the first ring. Obviously, there's nothing you can do other than there are some alignment holes that you can put filament in or pegs in on the first ring, which is 4 pieces, to get them lined up. So I did the best I could lining that up. And then when I built the second ring, I put on a piece and had it lined up and held in place and glued just 2 pieces together. And then when they dried, I glued another piece. I kind of worked my way around the body here and ended with the back panel last, just as I went, trying to glue them so that they were level with each other and as close as I could get to the ring below. So that I did the same thing with ring 2. I had ring 1 all glued and together. I built ring 2 on top of ring 1 so I could use these alignment pegs that are in each, the top of ring 1 and the top of ring 2. I used those to line up ring 2 on top of ring 1, and then with clamps and tape and actually the back panel, I literally for half an hour was holding it in place because I couldn't figure a way other than maybe buying a couple strap clamps that went all the way around to kind of hold the pieces in place. I literally for a half an hour was out here holding pieces together while the JB Weld plastic bonder cured. So that's what I'm doing up here. So I'm really hoping that when I'm done with all these pieces, that top ring is going to fit in properly and the top of this thing is going to be round. You do have some wiggle room, obviously, because after I get this all glued together, it'll just be the third ring glued together, and then when I glue it to here, it'll be glued at the bottom, but the top part won't be glued, so you'll have a little bit that you're going to be able to wiggle the plastic around the top if it's a little bit too far one way or the other. The holes, both holes in this top ring, and again, I'm not sure if this gets glued to the ring 3 or if the bolts just pass through it. I think the 4 bolts that hold the body together do get nuts put on top of them in those recessed areas to clamp it down. So hopefully if it's a little bit off, the threaded bolts going through there, the threaded rods that go through there will help pull it into alignment if it's a little bit out of round when I get done. But that's my biggest thing now, is being nervous about this is the final top ring of the body and hoping that it goes together and is fairly well rounded, so to speak, that everything fits right and there aren't big gaps in the top, that when eventually the dome parts and the other rings that sit on top of the top ring go in place, that things are fairly well aligned. So yeah, just wanted to show this. I started with the front piece, and I can tell that my seams are a little bit rough. as far as they're not perfectly smooth. They're a little bit, this one's a little bit too high on the bottom, but again, I haven't glued this to the body, so again, I'll hopefully be able to, whether it's, again, manually, well, actually you can't, yeah, when you're gluing the ring to ring, it's kind of hard to push and pull things and clamp because there isn't that much room to clamp. But for instance, I can get a clamp in here, hopefully one of these small clamps, and clamp those together, which might pull these in a better alignment. Anyway, so I did this piece first, and you can see these threaded rods. I'm using those because they're throughout the body, and they're not just 4 threaded rods that hold the body in place. There's also 2 additional threaded rods by where the shoulder pieces go. Shoulder pieces hold the hubs that hold the legs. So there's a couple down there. They don't go all the way through. If I remember right, I think I'm not sure where they terminate. But yeah, there's 6 places at least where you can put threaded rods, and so that's going to help align things as well, because you see the one here, that's a shoulder by one of the shoulders, and so that will help this piece align to keep it from going way too far, you know, left or right. Yeah, so I do have a little bit of elephant's foot that I haven't cleaned up and things like that, but again, I'm not gluing these 2 together right now. I'm just gluing this ring, so it seems to be going pretty good so far. So the pieces, this is one piece. This piece that spans over the large door opening and where the hub goes, that's another piece. And then comes these pieces that I absolutely don't like gluing. I was worried about, because they are like this. Again, I'm not trying to look a gift horse in the mouth. The person who sliced the Mark III body into pieces did everybody a favor, because Michael Baddeley didn't make a cut version. He might have now. I'm getting back on the forums now, but I haven't looked to see if he's got one. For example, this back door does not open, and I think he might have updated the design, so the new one has a back panel that's made to be removable, so you can get to the electronics. I wasn't too worried about that, so I've just kept the non-movable. Some people actually cut along panel lines and make the whole back panel section come off and then go back on with and be held in place with magnets. Really cool, but I wasn't going to do that. But these pieces, again, these pieces have no holes on the bottom that align with pegs. They go next to these shoulder pieces. Fit like this. And there's nothing really to hold them in place other than the glue. So no alignment pegs. That hole there, they go here. They don't pass through the hole, so you can't run a threaded rod through them. So I was worried about these pieces. How are they gonna stay lined up, and how am I going to clamp them, and etc., etc. But it turns out that wasn't nearly as bad as I thought, because you can see here I was able to clamp this part. So this I believe that this might be for the attaching the dome motor. Again, I've concentrating just on building the parts and haven't looked too far forward as to what everything is even 4, but you've got this deal with a bunch of bolt holes for adjustments of mounting things, and this clamp is able to hold them because they're flat, and this clamp can fit in there, so it's clamping those two together really nicely so they're aligned. And then up at the top, I've got just a small clamp that's keeping this piece and this piece together. And because, like I said, all of these pieces have this little lip, because the top ring sits here, I'm able to clamp between two pieces to help keep them aligned. And then I'm using these bar clamps that I got from Harbor Freight. I have one, fairly expensive one I got years and years ago, and I've only used a couple times in my life. So that's why I went to Harbor Freight and got these cheap ones. They were $6 each for 24-inch bar clamps, and I got 4 of them. And the reason I'm using one on this piece is this shoulder piece, as you can see, it stops here and picks up over here. So this part here, there's only this little bit that's holding this side and this side together, and I don't know if I can get a good view, but because of the way you print that, it has to bridge this material, so it's all sloppy filament because my printer's bridging isn't set up perfectly. So it's all kind of sloppy until the printer finally gets to the point where it's picking up and laying down nice layers. I don't care, because I am going to be sanding that smooth and filling that with the 2-part Bondo body filler, which is really strong stuff, and that should make me able to make that nice and smooth. But it does make it a point that flexes. So because I glued, first thing I did was place this in place and then put this second piece and glue it here. Held everything in place with all of the threaded rod holes I could find to help them line up with the ring behind or below. This piece here was lifting up in the air, and it's because that I had to have it clamped down here, and then, like I said, this part is a thin, fairly weak part with some crappy layers here as it prints. It prints in this orientation, so when the printer gets up to here, it has to bridge this gap, which makes it kind of funky until it lays enough funky layers down until it starts making better layers. So that was just making that part just naturally kind of want to lift up off ring 2 there. So I got another one of the bar clamps and just used it to clamp that piece so it's tight against ring 2. And then I did that at about 6 and 7 in the morning when I got out of work. And no, I did that at 6 o'clock last night. 3 o'clock, God. Okay, first 2 pieces were glued around 3 p.m. Friday. I worked Friday night, and then at about 7 a.m., 7:30, after I got out of work, I came out here and I glued this one in place. And it is feeling really nice. Right there, this piece is a little bit too far in, but again, I'm not gluing top to bottom, gluing side to side, so this piece is a little bit pushed in. So when I do glue this ring together, looks like there's enough room I might be able to put a clamp back there that will pull this part a little bit out, even though it's glued to this. But this part here, this is the seam line of the part that I just glued this morning. It's fitting pretty good with the body behind it. It's a little bit out right here, but then the seam is really good, and then it's pretty much flush. This panel is pretty flush. This is pretty flush. This seam seems like it's a little off, but I'm thinking it might just be the transition here between this top ring and the bottom of this ring, and that it might just be a little bit of sandpaper. I might be able to get that seam to look a bit better. So really happy with the way that's going. But again, like I said, I don't know how round this top is going to be, because there's no way I can put that top ring on while I've got all these clamps. And I need these clamps to be able to hold this stuff down to get it better lined up down here. So current plan is before I go to work tonight, I will be removing the clamps from the first joint that I glued yesterday. In fact, I could probably take those off now. I will leave these two on, so they're holding this part and this piece. And then I will probably go over here and glue this one on over here. Hope it goes as well as the other side. And that's going to leave the back. And that's, again, that's going to be my biggest problem, is how is this going to line up once I've got everything else in place. So I can tell right now that it doesn't really want to sit down on that alignment peg. So I don't want to jostle it too much to mess up the joint, but that was my biggest pain on ring 2. Same thing. I started around the front, and then this was the last piece because it's angled, so there's no real way to clamp it to get it to stay there. So I had to hold it and tape it, and I think I was able to use a clamp somewhere down at the bottom for a little bit of help. And I did this side, and then after that it glued, and I held it until it was looked like it was okay, and had tape wrapped around it and clamp where I could, let it dry overnight, and then came back and I did the same thing with this one. So this piece wasn't glued on both ends and put in. It was glued on one end, lined up, and then came back the next day, glued this end and lined it up. So it's going to be the same thing again with this panel here. Is I'll be trying to glue it to one side, and then I'll glue it to the other side. But I think what I'm going to do is I've got this side gluing now. Like I said, later today I'll glue this piece in, and then I think that's where I'm going to stop. Well, I know that's where I'm going to stop instead of while I'm gluing that one, like I said, but I want to give it more time before I take the clamps off than I did this one. This one I will do, and then I'll stop, because that's when this goes in, and I'll be able to determine, how off I am left and right. If I have to just cut off these alignment holes. One of them's already broken off. There's one here that is now stuck inside this upper piece just because they're tightly fitting. I probably need to make the holes in the bottom bigger. I've already gone around them with an X-Acto knife after I printed it, because when I printed it I used helper discs on the bottom, and some of the holes were plugged, and I had to break through the thin helper disc to open the holes. So they probably need to be opened up wider to fit in the holes better. But the hope is this feels so nice. It seems so well aligned, and it's clamped in a really good place where I know that this is aligned with this, so I know that piece is in a really good place as far as pretty much where it should be. And hopefully this will go the same. And then hopefully that means that the back won't be too hard to put on. And then when I do that, after I have this glued and let it set overnight, I'll take all the clamps off, I'll take all the threaded rods out, and then I'll be able to put the top ring on and see how round it is. So I'll do this, I'll put this ring on before I actually glue the back panel in, just as a way of, again, seeing am I out anywhere. And then I will be able to use this. I'll be able to run the threaded rods through the openings in this top ring, and I will be able to clamp, hopefully I'll be able to clamp the back panel to that ring, which hopefully will help me align with the rest of the ring when I glue it. So just want to make another video showing the assembly of ring 3. Again, my primary goal, I really wanted this summer, before I lost the painting weather, to get the whole body, all 3 rings assembled, glued together, primed, and painted white. So fingers crossed. So far it's going okay. I'm not 100% happy with my seams, but they are what they are, and I really don't want to start reprinting parts if I don't have to, because I'm not sure they would turn out any better than these that I already printed anyway, and I seem to be making it work. So stay tuned for, hopefully the next video will be a completed ring 3.